Good morning. This is John Richardson speaking with you from Toronto, Canada. Today is Tuesday, August the 15th, 2023. And I continue my series of podcasts with U.S. tax lawyer Virgina La Torre Jeker, who provides no end of great topics through her weekly blog. And my God, this week has been no exception because, as listeners will know, the Supreme Court recently handed down its decision in the Bittner case, which ruled that in the case of non-willful FBAR penalties, the IRS is restricted to imposing a $10,000 penalty based on the failure to file the form, regardless of the number of accounts. And this was a seismic decision. It was a decision that was great for Mr. Bittner, perhaps not so great for a lot of other people, for reasons that include the expectation that, my God, the IRS might just do a reset based on that decision. And Virginia, as always, is on top of this. And this was the topic of her blog post last week. So we are in for a great discussion today. How are you today, Virginia?
Hi, John. I'm doing well, and I hope you are too, despite this tougher decision we have coming down from the IRS post-Bittner.
Well, that's interesting. Yes. I think, within hours of the decision coming down, there was all this, oh my God, how will the IRS respond? This sort of thing. And I think, we talked about it at the time, as I recall. And my memory is that, one of the things that we thought was they might be more prone to try to assess willful penalties. Too early to tell. That might be true, but certainly too early to tell. But they have a handbook, right? A penalty handbook for FBARs, and it appears that they have begun what I would call a reset in how they view their allocation of penalties. Would you agree with that?
Oh, yes, it's a definite reset, John, and I would add that it came pretty swiftly after Bittner, within a few months. So, this was something they obviously were not terribly pleased with in the Bittner decision and had to reset their way of thinking on how to collect FBAR penalties.
All right, so let's go right back to very, very, very first principles. So the FBAR penalty, according to the Bittner, okay, so even going back a little further, could you give us the Super Reader's Digest version of, what this FBAR thing is about and what people are required to do?
Oh my, I think people have heard it all before, but just a super duper Reader's Digest version for any U.S. taxpayer that would include green card holders who has foreign financial accounts, which can be numerous things aside from bank accounts and stock brokerage accounts. It can include things like foreign pension plans, life insurance policies with a cash surrender value, mutual funds, foreign mutual funds, and so forth. Anyone who has these kinds of foreign financial accounts with an aggregate balance, and the highest aggregate balance during the calendar year, if it exceeds $10,000, then the person is required to list each and every foreign financial account on the FBAR form, which is Form 114. So I think that gives you the bird's eye view. When people have not filed properly, the IRS in the past, before the Bittner decision, was saying, well, you have violated the Bank Secrecy Act statute, which requires this reporting of foreign financial accounts, and every violation can be assessed a $10,000 penalty if the violation was non-willful. The IRS in the past was treating any unreported account that was required on the FBAR to be listed as a non-willful violation. So if you had 6 accounts that should have been listed on your FBAR for a particular calendar year, and you non-willfully didn't file that FBAR, you would be hit with a $60,000 penalty because the 10,000 would be multiplied by the number of accounts that were not listed. The Bittner decision, which came in April, I believe, of 2023, basically cut back and said, look, no, the interpretation of that violation provision means that it's the failure to file an annual FBAR, regardless of how many foreign accounts were not reported. So that would result in a single $10,000 penalty for a particular calendar year, assuming it was a non-willful violation, rather than separate $10,000 violations for each account that was not properly reported on the FBAR.
All right.
Now, we fast forward to July, and the IRS issued its special guidance memorandum to update its little handbook on FBAR examination procedures. Now, if people do look into this and start Googling to find the Internal Revenue Manual and FBAR, the guidance has not yet been incorporated into the manual, but it will be within the next 2 years, but it is effective as of July the 6th, 2023. So people really need to go to that guidance memorandum and not look at the IRM, the Internal Revenue Manual.
Okay. How are people supposed to know that, by the way?
Well, that's another question. I guess if they're tax gurus and nerds, they will know it from reading my tax blog and maybe other things online. But otherwise, I don't know how they're supposed to know. But
I would have
John,
thought
that
the
doesn't
IRS
surprise me.
made
There's so much in the law that the average person has no clue about. And even many tax professionals are unaware of that. You know, the IRS doesn't consider that their issue, the taxpayer's problem.
Well, maybe when people fly into the United States, the flight crew should be required to make an announcement. Please note that the new FBAR mitigation provisions are not included in the current version of the manual. Would you think?
That would be a good idea because we have a lot of people who are coming to the States from foreign countries and they're getting green cards, or they will trigger the substantial presence test because of their extended stays in America. And so frequently, unbeknownst to them, they have the duty to file an FBAR reporting all of their accounts back home in the home country and whatever else they may have that's non-US that qualifies as a foreign financial account. So yeah, I think this announcement on the airplane would be a grand idea, but I don't think it will happen.
Oh, that's too bad. That's too bad. Okay, so let's talk about what exactly this new guidance says and what we think is different and, you know, where this might go. So I'll start off with a very simple question. Do you see this new guidance as good news and taxpayer friendly?
I don't think it's the best news. I think that the IRS is looking for ways now to kind of maximize its ability to collect FBAR penalties in light of the Supreme Court decision in Bittner versus the United States. They are reminding examiners that the Bittner decision has changed the interpretation of violation as used in the Bank Secrecy Act. So they're telling the examiners that it should be read to mean a failure to file an FBAR report. That's what the violation is.
Okay, or to put it another way, what they're saying to their examiners, hey, the days of issuing a separate penalty for each account are over. All
Those
right.
days are over. That's right.
All right.
So
Okay.
that's the first thing that they're telling them. But then they go on and tell them that the mitigation provisions that were in the Internal Revenue Manual for non-willful FBAR violations will no longer be considered in calculating penalties, and that they are deleting the entire penalty mitigation chart from the FBAR examination procedures. And that chart was actually it was helpful for taxpayers to be able to see that chart and know that their penalties could be mitigated depending on the total amounts that were in their foreign financial accounts.
And so, I mean, as I read those provisions in my simple-minded way, I mean, I would sort of characterize them as, well, the more you have, the more we'll take. The less you have, the less you'll take. Do
That's
you think
correct.
that's accurate?
That's absolutely correct. That's absolutely correct. So, for example, if the maximum aggregate balance for all accounts, okay, to which the violations related per year, all right, if all of the accounts, the maximum aggregate balance of those did not exceed $50,000 at any time during the year, then it would only be $500 per non-willful violation. Now, remember, that meant per account. And the total penalties cannot exceed $5,000 per year. So we're looking at someone that for a calendar year does not have anything over $50,000 as the highest balance in his account. That's not, a terribly rich person. They're saying for him, the total non-willful penalties won't exceed $5,000 per year. Now you jump down in the chart to see the maximum aggregate balance for all accounts. If it exceeds $250,000, then we say the statutory maximum, which was $10,000 per non-willful violation, will apply. So that guy, because he has over 250,000 as the total aggregate balance, he's going to be hit with the $10,000 per account per calendar year penalty under the old mitigation guidelines. And yes, clearly, they're saying if you have more money, we're going to hit you with the maximum we can.
So it sort of reminds me a little bit of sort of a Marxist view of the world. From according to his abilities to each according to his needs. It's sort of the idea of equality. We're going to inflict pain equally, recognizing that the more you have, the more we have to take.
Well, let me just say that accounts, foreign accounts exceeding $250,000 a year, it is not an extremely big amount, okay? And people can get a mortgage, and that money's not theirs, but it's sitting in their account for a day, 5 minutes, 3 days, whatever. That amount is going to bring them easily up to this exceeding 250,000.
That's right. You think it's a good idea to be a U.S. citizen these days? It certainly sounds risky to me.
Well, it is risky, and especially if you're living abroad, as we have spoken about on numerous occasions. The law does not really give you an easy time of things, the tax law.
No, it doesn't. Okay, so they're getting rid of, so the Great Reset, it's sort of like, because of Bittner, Bittner got the attention of the IRS, and what we think is going on here is a great reset in the area of non-willful penalties. So the first thing they're doing is saying, no more mitigation provisions, okay? Or that what that means is we're going to let the individual examiner use his or her discretion. Would that be right?
That's right. That's exactly what they're saying.
Okay. What else are they doing here?
Well, they are reminding the examiner that not only the failure to report can trigger FBAR penalties, but the failure to maintain proper records with regard to the foreign financial accounts can also trigger FBAR penalties. And in my experience, I have not seen that penalty portion being applied, failure to maintain the records. So this could be a way of reminding examiners that they can actually get more money in violations than maybe they had been thinking about before, when they could get $10,000 per account.
So what they're really doing here is they're saying, oh my God, we've been restricted a little bit in terms of how much we can get for penalties. So why don't we figure out how we can get more penalties under the existing rules? Does that seem right?
Maybe. They are also reminding examiners that the statute provides if the taxpayer can demonstrate he has reasonable cause for not, complying with the FBAR rules, then the penalty can be reduced or forgiven, etc. But as you and I know, getting the IRS to accept your reasons for, quotes, reasonable cause, close quotes, is very difficult to do. It's not that easy to do. And I think with the IRS being probably in a bad mood, it's going to be tough to get reasonable cause.
Well, certainly, as awareness of, one of the things about Bittner is that I would have to think that it increased awareness of FBAR, right, somewhat. So as a perception of increased FBAR awareness increases, I think it's going to be harder and harder to make these reasonable cause arguments.
Absolutely.
All right. Now, what else have they? I don't. It's hard to know how this is going to play out. Obviously, right? It doesn't seem there's anything good in this reset, but I don't think I would presume that it's necessarily going to be horrible either. What do you think? What it does is it transfers discretion to the examiners more. Wasn't there something in there, though, that before they can issue both a record keeping a violation and a reporting violation, they have to get permission of a supervisor or some such thing? Did I read?
They need to consult with counsel.
What's that supposed to
mean? That must be the IRS counsel.
I'm sure it must mean calling you, Virginia.
No, it doesn't mean calling me or calling you, John.
Too bad. We can open up a side business. FBAR counsel consultant.
Consulting with IRS counsel. I guess, I don't know. We're going to have to see how it all plays out.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's no way to even know what that means. I think, actually,
No.
Okay. What else? Now I've seen a couple other articles about this that, are probably a little bit Chicken Little, presuming the worst possible scenario. I don't think that this is grounds for panic necessarily. I just see it as, well, the Great Reset, and I think that people better be prepared with their reasonable cause arguments earlier on. Does that make sense?
Yes, I think so. And I think that the more exposure in the press about FBAR is going to make it harder and harder for people to be granted reasonable cause. The Supreme Court case was big.
It was big. And it clearly would have increased awareness to some extent. But, we've talked about this before. I think the Bittner case was a win for Bittner, but not a win generally. I actually see it as a 7-2 loss, for reasons that we've discussed, because I think what a majority of the justices said was, well, they can do what they want. They just have to be clear about what they want.
Well, I think we're going to be paying close attention to this, John, as it develops and we see what the IRS is actually doing. But I don't think there's any way anyone can really predict right now how it's going to go down. So we just have to be patient, wait and see, and just hopefully people will become a little bit more careful with FBARs and professionals as well. I see a lot of professionals that get around this FBAR thing. They don't file it, and then when the taxpayer comes back and said, "Oh, you should have filed this for me and you didn't." They're like, "No, it's not part of your tax return. This is a separate thing. This isn't part of the Internal Revenue Code. This is part of the Bank Secrecy Act. So no, it wasn't my duty." So
do you believe that?
Yes, I've seen it. I've dealt with it. So
No, I mean, do you think that that's a credible claim to make?
look,
It's not my problem. It's Title 31, not Title 26.
listen, it depends on what the engagement letter said. So if the engagement letter said I'm responsible just to with the Internal Revenue Code, then they have a leg to stand on to say, look, clear as day, I didn't have a duty to do an FBAR for you.
Yeah.
It's not associated with your income tax.
You
To
know,
me, it's not professional, but what can I tell you? These are people that,
I
you
think
know,
that people need to take responsibility for their own FBARs anyway. I think that's important. I think that, frankly, I think that it should be taught in U.S. schools, FBAR. Every
yes, commencing in
year.
the 8th grade, probably.
Exactly. FBAR education classes. You can have physical education, maybe a bit of how to open a bank account, and then, what if it's a foreign bank account, and then introducing Mr. FBAR.
Yes, I think it's smart.
Only in America. Only in America. It's incredible stuff. All
Yeah, so
right.
John, I'll keep you posted if I hear of any real life cases that, my colleagues are involved in. We can
Yeah,
see
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it is interesting stuff. All right. Well, I began by saying that I was certainly alerted to this through your great blog. And how would other people get access to that great blog, Virginia?
Oh, thank you, John. It's always nice to me to hear that you've been reading and find it useful. So they can find the blog at www.us-tax.org. And a hyphen means a little dash, not an underscore, because I have a lot of people with confusion on that. And you know what? If they can't follow that, they can just Google my name and
It is sure to come up.
it'll sort of come. And
Great
I
stuff.
hope
Well,
that people will be reading. I have a whole category on FBARs under the blog, post categories.
well, as I've said before, I see you as the great FBARologist of our age. I mean, I don't think there's a collection from any one person. As much stuff on Mr. FBARs as you've got. I mean, we've been talking about FBAR, I think, for years. And
have,
the thing that's
John, we
amazing
have.
about it is there's always something new.
That's the scary part. He never sleeps.
I know it's like Mr. FBAR was born. We talk about it in his teenage years, young adulthood. We just keep going on through this.
Yep.
All right. Well, this is great, and I thank you for this, and I will look forward to the next one.
Yeah, thanks, John. I'll keep you posted and we can bring listeners up to date on the latest with FBAR as it develops.
Absolutely. Yes. Okay. Thank you.